I'm Lowe. I am a writer and a publisher, originally from Leeds, but based in Yorkshire. I work for Peepal Tree Press, and also a young writers group called Enigma.
My name's Okey Nzelu. I work for Carcanet Press in Manchester, and we publish mostly poetry. For them, I do sales, marketing, publicity, that kind of thing. I also write a bit of poetry, some book reviews. I did a radio play this year, and I'm working on a novel.
My name's Dorothea Smartt. I'm a poet. I have 2 books published with Peepal Tree Press. I also am co-director of Inscribe, which is a kind of offshoot of Peepal Tree Press that for the development of professional and creative development of writers and of Black and Asian writers. I perform my poetry, and I write poetry, and have been doing that for a couple of decades now.
Hello everyone, my name is Glave. I write fiction and non-fiction, and I teach in the US.
I'm Lady. I work at Dog On Publishing. I also help run Enigma, and I also help to organise this event, so you guys can all thank me later.
So it's lovely to see you all here for Black History Month and for Black and Asian Writers Conference. I call this time of year Black Employment Month because we're all guaranteed a few bookings, so it's quite nice to be able to be here. But also, I think I've discussed a few times this month the intersectionality between Black and LGBT issues. So it's quite nice that actually we've got a bit of a space that we can talk about that these days. So we're just going to have a bit of an informal panel discussion. I'm going to raise a few questions, and we're each going to have a bit of a chat about them. There will be opportunities for you guys to put your hands up and to ask questions if you have any burning desire to do so, and we do encourage it. And then hopefully that will fill up the time nicely. We've got quite a lot to discuss because we are very opinionated. So first of all, I'm just going to ask the panellists what part has been both Black and LGBT, or which other terms people want to use to identify themselves with, played in their own writing. So I guess I will start with Afshan, and we will work our way through.
So I first started writing quite young from an Asian perspective as a young Muslim girl. So it influenced a lot of my writing. And then I went on and came out, as it were, and then started writing for my sexuality as well. And now it's, I'd say a lot of my work is it's either based on my sexuality or almost based on my Blackness, I guess. So I think it's played a very big role on my writing in the way that I write and who I read as well now, because I've started to read many more Black writers because I didn't know them before. But yeah.
I think that being Black and gay manifests itself in all the work that I do, whether it's an anthology that I'm editing or the fiction or the non-fiction that I write. It manifests itself differently though, in that I think in my fiction the characters might be Black and queer or LGBT or gay, but they might not be. At the same time, in the non-fiction, if I'm taking a more direct stance as someone writing from my own perspective, having to do partly with my activism of the past or the present day, that would be a more clearly defined, I think, Black gay voice. And also my Caribbean Jamaican background comes into this as well, and that's much more so in the more recent past. So I think it's always there on some level. I was interested to hear what you said about the reading, because I think that it's been important to me also to try to find writers, Black LGBT writers as well, and at the same time try to extract and extrapolate from other writers who come from everywhere what I might learn from them additionally and then apply it to the craft, you know?
Dorothea?
Well, for me, when I started writing, it had a lot to do with my activism as a feminist, as a black feminist, and to some extent within, as part of that, being a black lesbian. Although that may not necessarily have made itself explicit in the work, it's obviously a part of who I am. So I think women's voices were very important to me. Being very much an active black feminist in London in the 80s, there was something very important about women speaking out, about women telling their stories, about us having a voice, and also, I guess, for myself, as for some women, it's a journey, ongoing journey of gaining a sense of having a right to have that voice and to tell those stories, that what I had to say was significant. And reading, learning, discovering, I think fairly, well, I'd been through school, and I hadn't read a whole heap of black writers, never mind anybody lesbian and gay. I didn't have any idea about that at that point. But in my early 20s, to discover African American writers and African Caribbean writers, women in particular, that those voices gave me a huge amount of inspiration and encouragement in terms of believing that it was something I had a right to do, or that I could do.
I would certainly pick up on the reading aspect. I think because it informs my work as a writer and also as a publisher. For me, being black and gay meant having this kind of twofold introduction to the wonderful feeling of what you described, this feeling of permission. When I remember, when I first, actually my father plonked down. If you're Nigerian, if you're Igbo and you want to be, and you like to write, your parents will put down in front of you things fall apart and just expect you to kind of absorb it into I didn't do that. I rebelled and thought, I didn't actually rebel. I tried to read it, but I couldn't appreciate it. I sensed I couldn't quite get out of it what I wanted, or what it wanted to give me. I didn't really. I think it was a feeling of, if I'd read it aged 12, I would have got to kind of a history of the Igbo's life, which is great. But what I actually got out of it when I read it after I graduated from university, after I read English, I think I got this wonderful sense of permission that I think is a much more sophisticated thing. And the same is true when I was reading Zadie Smith and Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, who I mentioned so many times because actually I just adore her. And it's funny because as a gay person, I think you get to do that twice if you're gay and black. It means that you can kind of, when I came to gay writers, when I came to like David Levitt and The Lost Language of Cranes and all the kind of gay writers I've loved, it was kind of a feeling of recognition. Like, there's, if you look on the internet, if you just search for the word permission, I guess, and with books, there's I think a lot of people will describe this feeling that when you read something for the first time that is meant for you, having read things that are meant for the majority demographic, there's a wonderful, wonderful feeling that you get. I think as a gay and black person, you get it twice. So for me, that has been a gift, really. That's what I would say.
Well, I've been thinking about this a lot recently. I've been commissioned to write about being mixed race for an anthology recently, and I just couldn't write anything because I was thinking, well, I know that I'm technically mixed race, but I've always identified as black, and it's meant to be a piece of memoir, it's meant to be a piece of life writing. I was like, what do I write about? When we were kids, all my brothers and sisters, and my sister and my cousins, we were all mixed race, so it all looked the same. So it was never really an issue, and I guess I kind of discovered later on that I was different. I guess I discovered that in mainstream society I was other quite late on in the game, because we lived in Chapeltown, which is a quite ethnically black area in Leeds, And so it never really occurred to me that it was anything other than different. And then I do remember one time, I'd never even realised that my mother was black. Someone had said to me something along the lines of, oh, your mother's black. And I remember feeling guilty about it, or like strange about it. And it was really, because I didn't have any terms or any reference points to be able to talk about that or to process that. I didn't know what it meant. So I remember me and my sister always used to fight over who got to sit next to my mum in bed on a Sunday when we watched Little House on the Prairie. And the only way that we would kind of get around that is my mum would sit in the middle and then we'd sit on our side. I remember that one Sunday after this person had said this thing to me, I didn't want to sit next to my mum. And that was really not like a nice thing, I guess, like feeling that you're not able to sit next to your mother in the bed when you just do that every week. So that was kind of when I guess I realised I was not white, as it were. And my mother had always told us to call ourselves black for the simple reason that she didn't want to pick us up from school and someone to be like, oh, is that you know, your nursery maid, or you know, is that someone who's the babysitter? That she wanted people to know that that was our mother, and you know, we had to make it was a political stance, I guess. And I think that was always important for us because we've always been quite light-skinned, although my sister's even more light-skinned than I am, so it's even more important for her, I think. And I didn't, when I think about how I used to write and things I used to read, everything I read had white characters in it. And I knew that I didn't quite feel that I identified with the characters that I was reading about. So what I did was a lot, in terms of my sexuality, I guess, I was reading lots of characters with women as the main protagonist. And when I was writing things, all my stories had white women as the main character. And it wasn't until I started reading black writers that actually all of a sudden that changed, and I started thinking, oh, why have I only ever written about white people? And it was because I was surrounded, obviously, by this culture where all the characters that you see in the mainstream are white. So I suddenly started writing about black women. And I still wasn't really writing about LGBT people. And it wasn't until much later on again that then I started discovering sort of LGBT writers, that then I started writing about queer people. And actually, as Okey says, there is a real liberation in discovering voices that speak to you and that sound like your friends and maybe sound like yourself, and you're reading that and you're thinking, Jerry Potter, yeah, that is exactly what I'm thinking, you know, and so it's really, really interesting, I guess. So for me, it definitely has informed my writing. I've noticed that change now in my writing, and going from fiction that had a lot of strong white women as main characters to characters that are black, that are queer, that kind of don't easily sit within categories as well. And I've noticed that especially in my poetry, I've become a lot more vocal about that as well. And I think it is, as Dorothea and Thomas said, again tied into activism. I found that the more I write about black and queer perspectives, the more political I get, and the more I feel like I want to get involved in activism. So for me, the writing has helped me.
You, Dorothea, you've all mentioned activism. Do you think that being a writer, being an LGBT writer, you kind of have to be an activist?
No. I don't think you have to. I personally don't think that you have to be anything except write. That question, it's a very vexed question. I don't want to take up all of your time with the response, but as you said that, I think that sometimes that pressure is leveled upon us, that if we are LGBT writers of color, perhaps, particularly, that we must somehow take political stances on things. But I think that's our prerogative, and this again is just my opinion. But I think that I worry about becoming the kind of writer who puts my political agenda and my political interests upon my characters. Because there are writers I know who do that, and I find that writing not very interesting. Because I feel as though the characters become the marionettes of the writer and don't really have their own life. But we can do that, maybe successfully, but it's not what I want to do. But you asked if we have to be, kind of have to be implicitly. I'll just say, I don't know, again, I think that maybe just talking about queerness and so on and so forth, and homosexuality and color, in societies that loathe both,
Yeah.
often in a world that loathes both, or all of any number thereof, is in itself going to be a political act. Because didn't you just say something about not just being able to express your voice and the right to speak? Both
Yeah.
you did, you know? What you all think about that?
No, I don't think it's. I wouldn't want anyone to tell me what I should be writing about or not writing about as any kind of writer, really. I mean, my activism. I don't know. Well, it's kind of a bit from and it's very, it's very. My activism is very personal to me in many respects, and the context that I was coming out of in London in the 80s. I don't know in some ways if without some of that encouragement or consciousness raising, as we used to call it back then, if I would have been able to claim being a writer, but within that also as well, I felt that the freedom for me to write about whatever I wanted to write about. So my activism hasn't necessarily been a result of my writing. Although, in a I suppose in a way I could kind of say my writing has been a result of my activism. Just in this, not in that very linear kind of like 1, 2, 3 kind of way, but just in the sense of giving me a fuller sense of myself that then allowed me to make some choices or see choices for myself where I hadn't necessarily seen choices before, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I think that does, and although I wouldn't personally describe myself as an activist, I certainly would describe myself as a feminist. I think anybody who's been raised by a single mother kind of has to be, and I don't see how you cannot be really. And my interest in feminism particularly kind of, it does drive my writing. It does. It makes me want to write about. I don't really like the term strong women. You don't really get the term strong men. But it makes me want to write about women in the way that I think is right to write about them, or helpful, or interesting, or creative in an industry that isn't always very creative about the way it treats women. I think for me, maybe even more directly than for you, Dorothea, my interest in the feminist movement has definitely driven my writing. But I do think I do agree. I don't think you can say that a writer has to take any kind of activist point on anything, and we all kind of get tired when we see television shows or read books or see movies that are quite issues-led, because that can take quite a reductive view of people. Black people aren't just, black people experience racism, but that doesn't mean that that's all you do all day long. I have breakfast and I go to work, I do other things.
You fit the racism around us.
Exactly. It's a tight schedule, but I fit it all in. And it's horrendous, but I've been at launches more than once where, at readings where by black writers, where people have actually said, why don't you write about the wildlife, as I'm going to say, in the sort of speech that I'm prepared to say later, but people have actually stood up and said, why are you writing about the wildlife, or why are you writing about literacy in your country? And you think, you can't do that. I mean, it's a very narrow view to take of people, and I think quite a destructive one. I think where it comes freely, it's wonderful, and it can be done very well, but I think that it comes from a deeper malaise as well, this desire to demand people from minorities to be kind of figureheads. I think it's quite dangerous.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think no one should be. It should never be mandatory for anyone to be an activist. For me, though, as Tom said, I think when you do speak out and speak up about your own experiences in a culture where perhaps your experiences aren't regularly explored or discussed or don't take the spotlight, then that is in itself arguably a political act. So I guess there was something political about writing as a black queer writer. And for me, I choose the terms black and queer specifically, although I know that different people in the panel choose different things. But again, that's because that's a political act, I guess. So yeah, so while it's not mandatory, I think sometimes it occurs without us necessarily realising as well. But I do also agree with Okey that making us figureheads can be problematic, because I think actually people are human, and when you make people figureheads, you expect them to be 100% politically correct, or to be 100% representative of a movement all the time, and you demand a lot from them, and I don't necessarily think that that's fair. I think that, for example, the way that black women who appear in films, for example, people might say, oh well, she's not representing this and she's not representing that, why is she not doing this and why is she not doing that? I think that's very unfair to expect that person to kind of represent everything and to encompass everything that you want just because they're the only black person that you might have seen in films recently, you know. So the problem with that is that maybe there's not enough of us speaking out in the first place, I guess.
Adam, I would like to just add to that as well, the question that you asked, that for the activism that I've done in the years that I did it, the people with whom I worked, we never called ourselves activists. Actually, we just thought that we were doing the work that we had to do. We didn't say, oh, now we're going to be activists, right? And then it turned out other people, to this day, people have called me an activist, but I've never really called myself an activist in anything that I've actually said.
What would you class as being an activist then?
I'm not really sure. That's the problem. I mean, I was invited to a human rights conference 2 years ago, and there were all these activists. And I said, well, I don't think I'm an activist. I just write. So I don't know what, I don't know. I mean, being politically engaged, I have no idea really and truly. Right? And I'm not even sure what it means to be a writer, except that you just write, you know? So that's why I wanted to add. And also, something came up that was very odd once when a black gay man, and I won't say from where, that's not really fair, but he was from, anyway, that doesn't make a difference, I suppose, right now. Anyway, he said to me, you always write about torture and dictatorship. What does that have to do with us? Right? And I thought that was a very odd question, but it was also speaking to this question about, well, what do we write about and what are we allowed to write about? And so why also then, or someone else said to me, oh, you write essays. Not many people of African descent who are queer do that. So why do you do it? And this is a black queer person who said this to me. So why do you do this? There's a way that we can kind of compartmentalize. That's why I'm always cautious about this thing about identity, even though it stamps itself upon us.
Yeah, I think our own communities can try and tell us what we can and can't write as well. I mean, I know that I've been like, you can't write that, it's so camp, and I think that's a really negative portrayal of gay men, because we don't all have sex in public toilets. And you're like, well, yeah, that's absolutely true, but actually, I think that sometimes we want to portray, communities want to portray themselves as being really well and healthy, and so we neglect things like mental health issues and drug addiction and the dark things that sometimes go on in communities, and we don't want to talk about those. We want to portray ourselves as, so the LGBT community, the gay community as it likes to call itself, likes to portray itself as happy, straight-looking white gay men with loads of money and no problems. And actually, that is not my experience, and that's not the experience of lots of other people. So why can I not write about the other sides of what I see? And, you know, I've got friends that have very, very, very different lives to that, and so I'm not going to have people from my own community say to me, you can't write about that because it's reductive and it makes us all look like stereotypes, or, you know, because those are some of the arguments you get. And also, I guess that applies to the black community as well. But I think it's nice to do it.
What you just said about, you know, communities telling you what you can and can't write. I mean, if you put communities aside, my mother tells me what I can and can't. And I find ways around it. I write under pseudonyms and stuff to try and, you know, write what I want to and have my mother not find out. So if you do know my pseudonym, please don't tell my mum. But, you know, I just don't know if you think maybe the people that, you know, like me, that can't maybe write what they want to, do you think pseudonyms are a good thing or a bad thing?
I think it's interesting because we were talking about what we described as activism, and I think it's very pertinent that the American columnist and gay rights activist Dan Savage says that as a gay person now, the most important thing you have to do in terms of activism is come out. You have to be visible, and really he says that I know that a lot of people don't agree with that, but I think that but what his point is that, you know, that the most important thing that you can do as a gay person is be visible, to show people that you are what gay people look like. You know, that you aren't necessarily white, that you aren't necessarily white, that you aren't necessarily rich, that you don't necessarily have no problems, at the same time that you aren't always having sex in public toilets. That, you know, and I think that for me, I personally wouldn't write under a pseudonym ever. I think visibility is what is probably one of the most important things for me in terms of what I'm writing. I think, you know, the novel that I'm writing now, importantly for me, it opens with the white mother sitting on a toilet and, you know, being constipated, and I think that is that kind of very unglorious aspect of women's lives. I think is something that doesn't get a lot of visibility, and I think I would want people to know that that is something that black men are interested in. And yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think pseudonyms can serve a purpose, as personas can serve a purpose. I would probably liken pseudonyms, for example, to things like drag. Whereas when someone's in drag, they can be a whole different person. They're like, hey, honey, you know, and you can do things, you've got a license to do things that you perhaps might not be able to do. I think it's really interesting as well that you mentioned that obviously you have a pseudonym for family reasons. I have been to discussions like this before, where people always assume that because you're black, that your family are kind of going to be homophobic and that you're going to have all these issues because you're black and you're, you know, queer or whatever. But I have to also say that that's not always everyone's experience as well. I mean, I come from, my mum's mixed race as well, identifies as black, and she never had a problem with it. So I guess it varies quite a lot, but I think that people need to be comfortable with what they need to be comfortable with, because we all have different things going on in our lives that sometimes we need to kind of deal with or overcome, and some people are more comfortable with being out and open, and I personally want to be out for the same reasons that Okey does, because I think it gives you a voice and it means that you're visible, but I also understand that that's not possible for everyone else, and it's not always fair to judge people on your own circumstances, because just because you're comfortable enough to be able to come out doesn't mean that other people are.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, the coming out thing, I suppose I want to say that I think that to be in a position where you can come out in so many respects is a kind of in a privilege in a kind of way, you know, and, you know, I think it's important to ask questions like, come out into what? You know, in terms of it, people pay different, like you said, people have pay different prices for coming out. And so I know there's this thought of people insisting that people come out, and that if they're not out, they're somehow kind of letting the side down. And, you know, my thing is, okay, so if you insist on people from various backgrounds, whether that's kind of economic or cultural, racial, religious backgrounds, you insist in, what are you offering them then? What support are you giving them? You know, what is there for them then? You're asking them to very often make an enormous sacrifice. You may even be asking them to put their life at risk, you know, so what are you offering them in return? So I don't feel that I can insist on someone coming out. My own being out is, you know, kind of measured in, you know, it's context specific, I would say, you know. I mean, I wouldn't necessarily, you know, there are some contexts where I would feel comfortable being out, and then there are other ones where I wouldn't necessarily, you know, or, you know, I would be putting my life at risk to come out, and I'm not going to do that just to I don't know, for some, what's his name?
I would qualify that, because he does say, he's very careful to make it clear that, you know, there are certain circumstances under which people can come out, and if you are not in a safe environment, then obviously don't. But I think that this is also something that pertains to my marketing job as well, because, you know, we have gay authors who perhaps are not openly gay and don't want that discussed, when even, you know, outside of the company, you have authors who are openly gay but don't want it sort of trotted out as a kind of a marketing ploy. And I think that that kind of sensitivity is something that I say it's specific to a marketing job, but really I think it's just specific to being a grown-up. And yeah.
I mean, as someone, like I said, I've been, performing and writing and having stuff published for the last 2 decades. And I know there's been times specifically when I have not wanted to be known as a lesbian writer. Partly because of people making erroneous assumptions then about what the content of my work was going to be. It's like, oh yeah, let's go and see this lesbian poet, and then they'll show up and I'll come along, and I stand there and I read my work about my experience of growing up in London in the 60s, very much focusing on my Caribbean, Bajan kind of heritage, and and it's like, and I thought there was going to be poems about sex. It's not to say that I don't write them. I mean, there's like 1 or 2 or whatever, but it's not the some defining thing of who I am. And then also as well, I think as a black writer, it's like, well, how much more ghettoized or exclusive, or you want to call it, do I want to make myself? And also, and just that general. Not to say that I haven't read at Women Only, read at lesbian events, but then also even like being on this panel today, it's there's this part of me that's like, but I'm not really like, when people say a lesbian writer, black lesbian writer, what are they expecting? But then here I am, and so I'm here because this is me. This is who and what I am. I'm, relatively out, I suppose, in some way. Perhaps it makes a difference that, in terms of my outness, like the dilemma of the pseudonym thing, there was a point when I wrote under a pseudonym. I'd forgotten, actually, that I did that. And that was to do with my parents. And I wasn't writing about anything particularly well, it was more when I was writing articles and book reviews and things like that, and I wrote under a pseudonym. Both my parents are dead now. I don't feel like I need to write under a pseudonym. I've made my peace with my parents. They've made their peace with me. I was out. I came out to my mum before she died. She was cool with it. It was like, yeah, all right, So, but the pseudonyms have their uses. They have their place for because if it gives a person, I think the space that they need from within the context that they're coming out of to write what they need to write, then I can't say anything sort of different about that, really. I mean, like I said, at one point it gave me the space to feel that I could write what I needed to write.
And I think it's interesting you mentioned people demanding that we come out, but then not making the space for us. And the people that usually demand that they want us to come out are the ones that are kind of, if you look at the gay community, I'm going to keep referring to it in that way, the kind of mainstream gay community, it is a majority white male gay community, and all from very similar backgrounds, and actually there isn't space necessarily for us. I went to an event the other week, Fierce, that Ajamu was running, and it was portraits of black queer artists, and we had a lovely meeting with Rainbow Noir, a black LGBT group in Manchester. They came in, and there was me and a couple of other sort of artists and activists discussing things, and actually it was really depressing that was the most black LGBT people I'd see together in one place probably ever. Because when you go to LGBT spaces, they are predominantly white. There are assumptions that if you walk up with a big group of black people that they think that you're going to be straight, or they don't let people in. So I do think it's problematic for white gay men to tell us that we all need to come out if they're not then going to make room for us at the bar, as it were, and in other spaces as well. So I think that's a really important point.
you made a difference between like queer writers and queer writing, I think. And I think it's Khadija that says if you don't tell your own story, somebody else will. Khadija Ibrahim.
Yeah.
And it's that sort of like, if we don't write our own queer stories, somebody else will come ahead and write them for us. I just thought you brought up as well that whole, people coming in and kind of thinking they're going to get queer content and they don't. And they're like, oh, but for a lesbian writer, so you should be writing.
Yeah, I think we have to tell our own stories, but I think our own stories are ours personally and individually, and they can be whatever stories we feel we need to tell. We don't have to feel that we're a mouthpiece or anything like that, because otherwise that would really kind of stilt what you want to write. It would make it kind of difficult to write freely, I guess. Although at the same time, I think it is nice to be able to feel that you're part of a community, that you are and you are speaking as part of the community. It's nice actually for us as writers and as artists to be able to feel that we can engage with that community, because specifically with things like poetry, for example, it can be seen in some types of poetry to be really small audiences, and it might be that the only community that they're writing for is other poets and poetry publishers, whereas I find that really problematic actually, because sometimes people say, oh, I don't read poetry, it's not for me, but then you read them one of your poems and they're like, oh wow, I never knew poetry could be like that. And that I think is important, is being able to speak to a community and to feel that you're part of it and that you're telling their stories as well, which not all writing does that, but some writing does, and I think that can be quite a nice thing to do as well. But again, I don't think anyone's forced to sort of write anything if they don't want to.
No, and I think that the word community is also very relevant here, because if we're talking about feeling forced to represent your demographic, feeling forced to represent gay people or black that isn't really something that one person can or should do. It's a community job, and I think that when you try and do otherwise, however correct one person's experience, account of their experiences to them, it's only one person's experience, however imaginative one person can be, that's only their way of telling even 1,000 people's stories. I don't think that's something that one person can or should do.
Yeah. So I think we've kind of done the kind of coming out thing today. So I mean, I'm going to move on to the next topic, which was in terms of publishing in general and the visibility of black and LGBT or gay or queer writers. Do publishers need to do more in order to make us more visible, to get more black and LGBT writers on their lists?
Is that quotas?
And in terms of, like quotas, should they bring in quotas, or should they just be more open to it, and how might they do that?
I don't know what I think about quotas, to be honest. They're a bit, because it's sort of, if you're only being published because you're black and gay, or black and queer or whatever, I don't know, it's just a bit, I can't, I don't know, it's
It's a bit patronising, isn't it?
Yeah.
A funny thing happened to me when I was at uni. I studied at Cambridge, and once I spoke to a woman, an old white woman who was lovely, but best of intents. I was doing a kind of fundraising thing for our college and kind of trying to raise money, and she said, and what's her name? And I told her my name. She said, oh, where are you from? And I said, well, I was born in England, my parents are from Nigeria. And she said, oh, well, how wonderful that you're here. And she kind of asked if I got here through some kind of special access thing. And I said, no, but what I wanted to say was, no, I went to public school like everybody else who got here. Like, there's something very galling about that. I mean, I did go to public school, but I also worked very, very hard to get to Cambridge. And I think, although I can't really relate to this in terms of writing, I've never been in any quota of black people or gay people in any writing context. But I think that if I were to be published, if I were to be on a publisher's list because I was black or gay, I think that would be very galling to me. I think, you work hard at writing, that's why you do it. I think if somebody, I think that being on a quota, I agree with you, Afshan, would kind of, for me, it would undercut it.
See, I have to say at the same time that when I first started writing, the first things were because I was Muslim, and because I was writing from a Muslim background. And it was only because of that I got the writing gigs that I did to start off with. So I'm very thankful for those. But at the same time, I'm sort of like only here because they need a Muslim girl. Or, you know, they need someone that's slightly brown to fill in their white crowd.
But
It is a bit of
no writing experience is perfect. I think that, you know, certainly no publishing experience is perfect. You know, I think you get, I think as a writer, from the writers whose lives I've read, and from my little experience, I think that you go through things that aren't ideal all your life.
And there is a constant kind of tension that actually sometimes you need to just say, oh, all right then, just because you need the money and, you know, you never get work. And so, for example, I made my joke about Black Employment Month earlier on in the session. But actually, you know, I hate the fact that sometimes I only get bookings during Black History Month. But then if I turn down every booking that I've got in Black History Month, then I wouldn't be able to eat. So it's that kind of tension. And so you've got to be aware of how these things work. And I think if you can use that to your advantage, actually it can be empowering as well. As long as you're aware of how people want to use you, and make sure that, you know, you get what you need out of it as well, so that you're not just a tool for someone else to kind of tick boxes and things. And I also think the other problem is that if you say to people, oh, well, we're not going to force you to publish any Black writers at all if you don't want to, they have to be good enough, then you get this argument, which I really hate, which is like, oh, well, we would publish Black writers, but they either don't submit to us, or their writing is not good enough, or they say things like, it's too religious, or it's too culturally specific, and our readers won't get this, i.e. they, as a middle-class white man, don't get what is being written about. And that's the other danger, that if you don't have any kind of pressure on people to kind of publish more diverse writers, then you'll probably end up with no diversity whatsoever.
I'm not so sure about that, you see, because I was in the Women in the Spotlight, in the wonderful Women in the Spotlight panel, just before lunch, and a white man, you know, spoke up and said, you know, I do think, you know, the question was raised, do we still need Women in the Spotlight panels? Do we still need a Black conference? And this man, you know, this white man raised his hand and said, well, you know, I read a lot of literature by Black women. He said, I think he said he collects books by Black women, I think professionally, and I thought, you know, part of me wanted to say, oh, good for you, white man, you know, going outside of your comfort zone. Well, maybe it's not his comfort zone. Maybe, you know, I think this assumption that just because you are white, you therefore grew up with only white people around you, or that you never had experiences which endeared a community to you that wasn't your own. I think, yes, there are definitely problems of diversity in publishing. I think we all know that. But I think that also I don't think it's quite fair to assume that those problems are universal. I think that even within the white community there is a lot of diversity. That's what I think.
Do you think if you accidentally left off your sexuality off your bio when you were submitting to a publisher, it would be, you know, you'd get published? Would you ever do that?
That's interesting. Well, in what
Well,
context
when
would
we
you
all
do
introduce
this?
ourselves, when we all introduce ourselves, none of us mentioned our sexuality in the first statement. So if we'd have just set that off with whatever it was we were wanting to get published, would you do that? Is that something that, no?
I don't think, well, what do you mean, going to a publisher?
Yeah.
It wouldn't be possible for me to do that because the content of my work has things in it. But I wanted to say one thing in regard to this, that I think, point one, that maybe this question turns on the assumption that the publishing context which we might wish to enter is going to be white dominated, right? Whether it's journals or an actual publishing house, and that the frame of reference there might not have comprehension of what the cultural experience from which we come actually is, right? Because I was going to say that I think really, truly, my question at first was, how well am I going to be edited wherever I go? And so irrespective if I'm taken as part of a quota or not, that in itself has its own complications. I'm maybe going to be a commodity. But is that editor going to really understand what I'm trying to do and really edit me with sensitivities that I feel that I'm doing the best possible work that I can, right? And making the mistakes perhaps that I need to make, and not making mistakes that I really don't need to make. But is my writing going to always, to me that's the most important thing, is how well treated is my writing? Because I don't care so much about myself as a person. I mean, in the sense of this context of what am I trying to say exactly? I care about myself as a human being, but I care about my writing, I think, even more.
Yeah.
You know, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And I want that to be the thing. I'd rather have that be in the foreground.
Yeah.
But sometimes people might not have cultural sensitivity to one's own experience, but be very good editors. I'm taking it to a slightly different direction, but I just want to point that out everyone as well. And I just say one other thing also, Adam, and also to Ashley, I'm sorry, I was going to say Tasha, yeah, that I remember with my first book that there was a question of, with the cover, they wanted to put, and these are wonderful people whom I loved and I still love them, and they were all white. They wanted to put, in the US, they wanted to put on the front cover a black man's naked body from his back, showing his bum, and his bum cheeks, as one would say, you know? And I thought, no. I don't want that on the cover of my book, because that's not what I'm just troubled by this image as a kind of representative image of the complexities that this book, I feel, really presents, right? And I think that's something that we often struggle with. We talked about this in the last question.
Yeah.
The question of representation. So, where am I going with all this? You asked about when we talk about our sexuality. I think, I mean, after a while, maybe it's hard to avoid because people know.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe in the beginning when you're starting out, people don't know who you are, right? But after a book or two, if you deal with it, you know, I mean, in a way, like when I did my anthology, Our Caribbean, right, a gathering of lesbian and gay writing from the Antilles, I said, okay, fine, so now everybody knows. If they didn't know before, they know. I don't have to worry about it anymore, right? I don't have to say it. But as time goes on, right, I mean, isn't it, I mean, although maybe in Dorothy's case, that's not the case, because you said, for example, like your second book doesn't really deal so much with lesbian.
My first book doesn't.
Doesn't either.
I mean, there's yeah, queer and queer writing.
Just like we're
Yeah.
lesbian.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think when I was thinking about, I mean, I'd already been writing for a number of years before it came to, okay, I think I'm ready to do for a book now. I wasn't in any hurry to have a book published because I wanted my book to be good, I wanted my book to be well edited, I wanted my book to be published by a publisher that I didn't want my book to just kind of disappear, you know, and I wanted to be practice at what I was doing, as I suppose, and I wanted to be. I was quite, you know, kind of conscious of like I wanted to be published by someone. I wanted to be in like good company in terms of like the list of who they were publishing and the type of work that was coming out and whether it would be taken kind of seriously and those kinds of things were things that I thought about. I don't think my bio in that first book, or even actually probably in my second book, doesn't say that I'm a lesbian.
I don't think it does in anything, does it?
No. It might, yeah.
I'm always writing your bio and things, and I'm like,
Yeah, it's just, it's not there.
Does it have your racial identity?
it just says beige, doesn't it?
Well, it says it, yeah, it's got the beige.
There are white Bayesians and
True.
red Bayesians. And
I mean, mine doesn't even have, mine doesn't either, mine just says, born in Leeds, living in Manchester, so, and my name you couldn't really tell from my name. I mean, it's interesting because people still, unless you tell them what you are, they don't always know, you know, how you identify yourself. Anyway, I did have a writer who emailed me and asked me if I was Chinese, because a lot of Chinese Caribbeans have the surname Lowe. So she said, oh, are you Chinese too? Because you've got the same surname as me. And I was like, unfortunately not, no. But so you can't always tell, so people will bring what they want to bring to it. But then again, I guess within the bio there are things that would give it away if it says, you know, featured editor at Bhat magazine or travel editor at So Gay magazine. Those kind of things kind of give it away, I think.
I'm very interested.
Can I just ask, has anyone been asked to change their name to make themselves sound more black? I'm sort of thinking about you, Dorothea, in a way, just because that's something that I've come across. You know, to sell yourself to a market. Well, that's kind of how I think it was 20 years ago, but people I've come across now,
Never.
writing novels.
No.
No.
I've never had anybody ask me to change my name. No.
I think maybe content-wise, I can see. I mean, I'm sure I've heard of people being asked to, you know, make stuff more black or
Yeah.
either less black, either have it really, really cultural or have it just nothing at all.
Yeah.
But I don't know if anyone had asked that name. That's interesting. I wonder.
And yeah, it's not something I've heard of. Although I could imagine it, because there do seem to be times when they want sort of these really African-y books with flowers on the front cover and things like that, you know, like a hibiscus on it and things. So, so I can imagine that at times the marketing departments think, oh, we need to get in like a writer that's going to be exotic, that will feel like exotic niche, and then we can market this great exotic book. But I've never kind of come across it myself, I guess.
And I think, sorry, I just want to say one more thing. I do think that's a very interesting point about exoticisation. I think that a lot of if there is trouble, and I think that there is a little bit of trouble between, you know, in terms of intersectionality between the two communities that we're talking about here, I think a lot of it is to do with exoticisation. I think a lot of it is to do with false perceptions of the black community that kind of present it as a bit more narrow, as a lot more narrow-minded, a lot more hyper-masculine, and a lot more male-centric than it really is, that kind of exclude women and exclude gay people generally. I think that means it's quite hard to combine, you know, an exoticised version of a black or Asian community with a realistic portrayal of or even an exoticised portrayal of a gay man. And I think that sounds to me like what was happening with that cover that your publicist suggested. And I was very interested by that you're saying that you were interested in the ability of an editor to edit your work. And I was wondering if you had any, and I think that's a very important thing to be aware of. I don't know if you had any examples.
We'll go to this question as well, otherwise you're not going to get half an hour yet. So, sorry, you had a question?
When you were bringing up the whole thing of, you know, going to Cambridge and, you know, working hard and being identified, I also went to Cambridge back in the early 80s, and I didn't go to public school, so maybe I even worked harder. But the main reason I went to Cambridge was just so that when I got older, I would, when people sort of, I'm going back to the question of quotas, okay? So I'm going all the way back there. And the whole thing about going to Cambridge for me was about when I go for a job, nobody can say I'm not qualified. But what I've discovered in the 20 years since then is that you can have the Cambridge, you can have the awards, and they can look you in your face and basically tell you that yes, you should sort of get the job, but we're still not going to give it to you. So I think that reality, and I've also had funders that want to, I work mostly in theater, and when I was in Scotland, it was actually the funders who wanted me to do grassroots black work when what I wanted to do was something totally different. And I have no problem about identifying as black, but I think I should be able to do whatever the hell I want. That's what I think all the fight was about. So I think that that fight is not actually over yet. The thing about quotas, you know, when you say quotas, everybody is like, then they'll think I'm not qualified. But the fact is, the person who's racist doesn't care whether you're qualified or not. And if you have a law that says that you have to hire the most, like my parents, the reason why I was able to do all this trash is because my parents were civil servants back in the States. And they were civil servants because Harry Truman passed a law that said that the person who got the highest grade on a test got the job. And that meant that all black people who were good at taking tests, they got jobs. So unless you can guarantee by law that actually the best qualified person is going to get this job, you are always going to have a problem with people who, no matter how good you are, you can, like I said, awards, the whole 9 yards, they still will find a reason not to give you that job. So what do you do with those people?
I think it's a very difficult thing to say. Can I say I definitely, oh my God, I definitely identify. I don't think this is a Cambridge thing. I came back from university and I thought I've done English for 3 years and I studied and I've got my degree, and then I came back, and I think just perhaps when you go to university, you kind of come back and you think that the whole world is going to see you differently, and it didn't. You know, I can't walk into a shop wearing a hoodie, or people will follow me around. Like that was the shock for me. You know, I have a degree and yet I'm still a black man. And that's all I am to some people, and I definitely do that. But I think it's very difficult. I think that in terms of is this question about what can we do to make sure that the best writers, irrespective of race, get the visibility, and that is difficult to do. I don't personally have any experience or work in editorial policy. That's not what I do. But I think in terms of marketing, what we do at Carcanet is we just do the best for all of our authors in terms of we submit all of our authors to festivals, we have regular meetings with festival organisers, and it's not about race, it's about this book is about such and such a thing, how can we get this into your schedule? This book is about such and such a thing, how can we make this reviewer? How can we present this to as many reviewers as possible and make them think that this is good poetry or fiction or biography, whatever it is we're doing. You know, it's not, in terms of editorial, I can't really comment on that. And I think that maybe that's even more important than marketing, because that's getting them a book in the first place, you know, rather than just getting it out there. I'm sorry, I can't really...
I'm going to be a bit difficult to put cats on the pigeons a little bit here, because I do know that less than 1% of poetry books published in the UK are by Black and Asian writers.
Really?
0.7%. And there are certain publishers, and names will not be mentioned, but there are certain publishers that don't publish a lot of Black and Asian poets. And they have had slaps on the wrist from the Arts Council saying, you need to publish more Black and Asian poets. And so they have got to publish more Black and Asian poets. And the arguments that they had used were things like, oh, well, we just weren't getting the submissions, you know, but the second they were told they had to do it, they suddenly found the books. So I do agree that while, you know, people might say, oh, we present the book as the best book that it is, I also find that argument similar to the argument like, oh, I don't see race, I just see people.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, while race still does matter to a lot of people, people saying that we don't notice it doesn't help the issue, because for some people it is still very much a real thing, I guess. Sorry, there's the lady at the back, and then we'll
I just wanted to follow on from that really and say that although I think quotas is a very crude idea, the idea of a quota, it's not a very effective tool, but you have to have something that acknowledges that there isn't a level playing field. I mean, that's, however you do it, you've got to acknowledge that there isn't a level playing field in publishing, there isn't a level playing field in education, there isn't a level playing field anywhere. And what tools are you going to use? Whether it's having more publishing houses like Peepal Tree, whether it's having more programmes like Inscribe that support and mentor, whether it's programmes in schools around teenagers and even younger in primary schools, encouraging doing the work with the young people. However you do it, you've got to put in something. I'm not sure that the quota is the thing, but I think you've got to put in something to address that inequality.
We teach Black literature and queer literature in universities and high schools, and that's what I do.
Yeah,
for example.
I think it starts with education.
Center of the curriculum.
Yeah.
And I've actually, although I completely the idea of quotas, what I have found helpful about Enigma, the writing group that Adam set up in Mentors, is that we have this wonderful, we're a writers group with some interesting experiences to some extent, and I think that, you know, that is a really valuable thing, you know, to be able to talk to people and share ideas.
It's really nice, isn't it? It's inspiring.
Yeah.
And actually what's really great about it is we've got lots of population within the group as well, probably about 50-50, which is really, really good for me. I think, Shamshad, you also had your hand up?
Yeah, I think, does it spread the word that did the research into the state of poetry and who it's been published by? And I think Carcanet may have been one of the publishers that was highlighted as having not published British Black writers. And I think what was partly being identified was around the people who were the editors, who the sensibility in which they were looking at the writing that was coming in, how they were valuing it, and that it seemed to have been the responsibility of smaller publishers, like Cultureword, who supported writers and published, given us the first opportunity to be published. And in terms of myself, my work was published by Salt, but they were somebody who sort of expanded who they would consider, but they hadn't done that work to support us. And I know they're taking submissions now from solo poet collections. I think Carcanet has been good for bringing in writers and publishing writers from abroad, but not necessarily, I don't know if their practice has changed in terms of being proactive in publishing writers from Britain and UK.
I feel I feel very sorry to have to I have no experience in the editorial department at Carcanet. I can't really, and in the structure of Carcanet, I don't really have any influence there. I certainly know what you mean. I do, and I think that's true. That we are much better at bringing in writers from other geographical locations of colour than writers in the UK. Further than that, I'm so sorry. I can't. I think that it's a problem. I don't know why exactly it's a problem in our specific circumstance or what we could do to change those circumstances. I wish I could be more helpful.
I think the other thing, being black and gay, and having gone through, the whole thing, the thing about some of these places, that are held up as prestigious or whatever, and you're supposed to want to get into them, you really need, I think I have come to the point where I have to ask myself, do I really like anything that they do?
Yeah.
Like, when you're a young writer, especially for theater, if that theater never puts on a play that you actually want to see, why should you be bothered with them? I think that one of the things that I've realized is like I should love those who love me, and the people, like you were saying, you got no support. I think I really only want to work with people I think actually are interested in my work. I'm interested in their work. They're going to support me. We can talk to each other, not, I'm having to hold a gun at your head, even though no matter how good I am, you really don't want me here.
Exactly.
Why should I be bothered with you? And I think the more that we do that, the happier and the better, and we'll have a lot less angst, our mental health will improve. It's for the birds, these people. If they're going to act like that, then why should I be bothered with you?
Exactly.
It's not like you're so wonderful to begin with.
And I think that also when you're submitting to a community or a magazine,
Sorry?
Oh, sorry. I think that also when you're submitting to a community or a magazine, or a theatre, I think it is a question of community. And I think that you're right. I think it's about making sure that your writing fits in where it belongs. It's a precious thing, almost a living thing. And I think that magazines, these organisations are communities, and I think it's good to and important, essential, to make sure that your writing fits in where you're putting it.
But this is actually something I would like to address briefly, this idea of fitting in, because in fact, I believe very much in taking, at least for myself, my work back to my particular, if you will, use the word in quotes, right, inverted commas, communities. Mm-hmm. I think for me that's very important, wherever that might be. At the same time that I find it takes a lot of work to do that. I think to write letters or emails and so on, to find people in some of the smallest, most out-of-the-way places where that work can be taken. Sometimes to people's disagreement, because they might not agree with the sexuality, or they might not agree with the class issues, or whatever they might be. But at the same time, I'm not sure where my work really fits in. I don't know that it even fits in, but I feel that my contribution, because of who I am and what I believe in, and what I wish to do and what I wish to give back, that is in itself something worth, whether or not it's appreciated or seen or received, it's my contribution. But it might not fit in with particular values in my so-called communities, right? So, I mean, that's been something that's happened quite a bit. But I think that's also very interesting friction. I find it because we're not all the same. Mm-hmm. And if we're black LGBT or mixed race LGBT or whatever the hell we are, we bump up against each other in this whole human interaction, and we learn from each other in this way. So I find it very interesting, like people can say, okay, two black lesbians, and they're totally different women, obviously they're going to be. But what do they learn from each other? The jigsaw puzzle, it's not like this, no, it's like bung,
Yeah, and in terms of politics, people always assume that if you're black or if you're LGBT, you're going to be sort of left of the spectrum, but actually I know, people that are completely not, and sometimes you meet, you meet some really diverse characters that you might have blazing rows with because you disagree with them not so much, but I guess that's part of life, isn't it? That's part of being life.
So can I just whack one more thing about it? It's kind of about community, but it's actually about markets and opportunities in a way. It's the tragedy of the state of the bookshops at the moment. Because the publishers are one thing, but the other thing is all the independent bookshops practically have gone. And they weren't just shops, they were also communities, and they really fostered lots of different kinds of writing and promoted them. And I know when my book was published, and I wrote a book 5 years ago now, that was set in my hometown, and it had so much in it about my place. But the independent bookshop in that city's gone. There was only Waterstones. I went to Waterstones and said, look, this is a book about Sheffield, set in Sheffield. It's got lesbian themes in it, it's got black themes in it, it's got all the... They weren't interested. They didn't even do an event about it. Because it wasn't, to them, it wasn't a big market.
They've got they've got like a computer, a big computer, and it's like computer says no kind of thing. So the computer says, we estimate this book's going to sell 4 copies nationwide, so they order the 4 core stock copies of that book, and then that's it. And then all these algorithms decide what's going to sell, and that's what they will buy. And then there's a little bit of leeway with regional buyers in the shops, but they generally don't. I think Kai had a question, and then I'll go to you then.
Yeah, it's not a perfectly formed question, but I was trying to think through. I don't know if something else that we're coming across is to preface it, I'll say that I do have kind of hesitations when you go to black LGBT events, and it does feel that sometimes there's the writer up there who is performing blackness or performing queerness, and you think, where's the fucking point? And it's this kind of old, like you're performing identity and you don't perform the work. And I do have these kind of conflicted feelings about that, about the identity artist who is more identity than they are artists. But then there's something in me that wonders, beyond the institutions that we're talking about, the publishing houses, is there a culture of taste that we're pretending is a level playing field as well? And that isn't level at all. And sometimes, speaking as the one black gay writer who is published by Carcanet.
I was just trying to say your name.
There's sometimes you get published by this place that you shouldn't be published by, but it's the same thing as getting into Cambridge, that you know how to tick certain boxes, and those boxes aren't necessarily, I don't know how to put it, that taste, the things that we just accept as that's good taste. It comes from a certain kind of culture, and certain people can fit those rules, but those rules aren't necessarily right. And I wonder about how we make space for people who challenge just the kind of autonomy or the kind of the tyranny of taste that's kind of that built up in a kind of very problematic way through a very kind of problematic culture.
I think that tyranny of taste is also backed by money, not true, Kyle?
Yeah.
Very powerful forces of money, institutions, etc., that dictate taste as well. Because taste is also partly a fiction.
Right,
It's constructed by people's imaginations. And certainly by what publishers believe, as Adam said. Publishers and large bookstore chains like Waterstones believe will be consumable and desirable.
But then again, there is a great kind of writer who knows that, as crass as it is, who knows the quote-unquote ruling class taste and knows how to acknowledge it and challenge it and expand it ever so slightly, and that makes room for other kinds of black voices and LGBT voices. But you don't know if that's, should we just kind of support the people who can work their way into that system of taste and expand it, or should we just go for the ones who completely want to demolish it?
Well, I think what's wonderful and also slightly problematic about the publishing community is that it's yes, there are the big publishers that have an enormous amount of control, but there's also a huge amount of much smaller companies doing very, very different things. I think that's especially true of poetry magazines and literary magazines. There's an incredible amount of diversity, which I think isn't really always given the visibility and recognition that it deserves. But that's as great as it is that there are all these people doing lots of different things. You're right. The taste, there is a sort of a central computer, if you like, as in Waterstones, that decides the taste of the communities, and I think that is especially problematic now when people are thinking, with the advent of e-publishing, and people are thinking, well, do we even really need gatekeepers? What role do publishers provide. I personally think that gatekeeping isn't really what publishers do best. I think what publishers do best is editing. I think what publishers do best is knowledge where they have it, like you said, Thomas, of what somebody is writing and how to make it do what it does better, how to make more people see it.
Yeah.
I think that isn't really something that e-publishing necessarily, if it's not done properly, and self-publishing necessarily can do. But I think that I think it does all tie in, this idea of gatekeepers. I think it's particularly problematic now.
And there was a lady there that had a question.
I just had a question about, as writers, in terms of your engagement with your readers, has the kind of whole digital thing made you do things differently? Are you taking that on board? Are you reaching out in different ways than perhaps you did a few years ago? And what does that mean for your writing and your place as a writer?
Sorry, was that just...
To the panel, everybody.
We've got online blogs and stuff, and I've used blogs quite a lot, because it's just easy to kind of do. But, I mean, I'm quite used to writing, I'd say, still.
I mean, I think it's quite interesting. Dorothea mentioned earlier, she wanted her book to be right, and I found actually as I get older that I'm more interested in things being right than being quick. But I know a lot of writers are not like that now, and they're like, I want this out now, I want this out now. What I tend to do, which is a bit naughty, is that I think that I need a book for like a specific event. Like if a festival's coming up and I kind of want to be in it, they're like, oh, you need a new book. Then I might just put together like a little chapbook and then like publish it quietly and not let anyone know that it's there. They're like, oh yeah, I've got this book, and they come and do it, but then that doesn't count for a real book. And then secretly work on my real book in the shadows, so that when I feel that I'm actually ready for my real book, then my real book will come out. I know lots of people that are kind of, because of the advent of e-books and how easy it is to kind of publish things now, that are kind of like, I want to publish now, and quality can be the thing that gets lost, and also your voice can get lost in that as well, because there's such a polyphony of voices everywhere. There's so many different noises going on, then which one do you hone in on? And so it's very easy for lots of people to get lost in that, I guess. So while I do think that e-publishing has a use and it has a purpose, and I know lots of writers that generate quite big audiences for themselves through sort of self-publishing an e-book, and I think that's if you are going to do it, that's how you do it. But I wouldn't go into it thinking I'm going to write a masterpiece, a literary masterpiece that's really difficult and complex, and expect it to get loads of reviews and to kind of be in the front page of the Guardian or whatever. That's not going to happen from that kind of publication. So I think you need to be aware of what purposes it can serve and use it for the correct ones, I guess.
I would like to draw, I'm not sure if this is something we've already drawn, but a distinction between e-publishing and self-publishing. I'm not trying to make myself clear before, but I think that e-publishing allows self-publishing. The fact that you can put a book on Amazon and just have people buy it, and I think that has given people a certain freedom, which I think is great in e-publishing, and it's also gone beyond. There are writers who are published by one of some of the biggest publishing houses, and who don't like the way that those publishing houses treat their books. My colleague told me of one woman who decided, she was published, I can't remember who it was by, it was a very big publishing house, and she decided, I probably shouldn't say that name anyway, she just decided, she was going to self-publish it, but what she did was, she published it, she hired people to do all the work, but they were working for her in a way that a big publisher wouldn't necessarily. And I think that's one example of this wonderful freedom that people are getting.
And I think that's
which is a large way a good thing. I think that it's very easy, certainly if you work for a publisher, to poo-poo self-publishing. But I think if it's done in a thoughtful, well-researched way, I think it's a very valuable thing.
And I don't think we should confuse easy routes to publishing with necessary routes to publishing, because as you just said, she hired people to do the jobs professionally. I think that's kind of very important.
For me, personally, it hasn't had that much of an impact, I don't think. I mean, I think some of the publishing poetry is very different to publishing fiction anyway. It's a completely different kind of ball game, and some of the hullabaloo and excitement about e-publishing, you know, it's specific to fiction, very specific to fiction, and I don't know if e-publishing can actually technically reproduce poetry in the way that it might need to be in terms of all the line breaks and those kinds of things. I don't know if you can put a poetry book on Kindle without losing the formatting stuff, you know.
I know that they're formatting, but it depends on.
It's difficult.
There's little things like if you make the text too big, then it moves around. And me and Ashan have done a bit of e-publishing. We've tried with poetry, and it can be an absolute pain to get it right. And I think a lot of publishers are just thinking, actually, until it gets easier or until it gets more sort of, until the results are more, you can anticipate what the results will be, I guess, then they're not willing to invest in the poetry side of it just because it's...
Because I think there was a publisher in the US, I can't remember the name of them now. I'm going to say something like Grey Fox or Grey Wolf. I think it was either them or another kind of medium-sized, reputable poetry publisher who actually got funding, to research the dilemmas that we've experienced in terms of putting poetry into sort of e-format and stuff like that.
Because also it was readers as well, they process all the information differently, so me and Ashan were discovering that you'd lay it out and it would look gorgeous in one, you'd be like, oh wow, we've cracked it, and then you try it in a different reading, and you're like, oh my god, that looks awful. And it was frustrating, because those are things that you couldn't always...
But then I think, the digital sort of world generally, I think if there's been any kind of impact, it's to do with my work being represented in audio libraries and in video kind of libraries and stuff, and having a, not to say that this is me, I haven't necessarily got it all that together, because there's oftentimes nobody who's going to put you on these formats unless they come to you, which doesn't happen very often, or you go out and make it happen. But like, for example, I was interested to see that, Malika Booker, who's there, like with her new book now, part of what she's doing is releasing kind of videos of herself with the poems, And I think that's one way that the whole kind of digital kind of revolution, that's the way that it's made an impact on poets.
And that's reaching very different audiences as well, isn't it? Because if a poetry book sells 400 copies in print, that's good, that's really good. But you can have something on YouTube that gets viewed by thousands of people that wouldn't go to the bookshops and buy the poetry book, or they wouldn't go to the live readings and buy it anywhere, because that world they think isn't for them.
How do you monetize the? I'm sorry. I was just going to say, how do you monetize the SoundCloud and YouTube?
Well, on YouTube you can add adverts to it, and you can make money.
No, it's not.
But there can be other ways, I guess. I mean, it might serve as a marketing tool for selling the book, or it might also be a marketing tool to sell yourself, actually, because then you might get invited to go to conferences and festivals and do workshops and things, and actually you can make quite a bit more money sometimes doing that than by selling a poetry book.
I just wanted to add quickly that I've used Facebook a lot for my most recent publication, and that's helped a bit, but I also hired a publicist in the UK and in North America, and just said, just please do this for me, this publicity thing, because I find it very boring and tedious. I need to do it a lot, and I really want to spend my time doing the work, right? Because if I don't do the work, then I don't have anything to do, and also that's what I'm most interested in, so I'm not really interested in doing a lot of publicity, and so, but it doesn't really bore me. But I think that we live in a world in which we have to face that. If we want to be seen, we have to. I guess there's a question, like my question is, do I want to be a writer or do I want to be an author? Right? Which I think there's a difference between, and I'm being a little bit judgmental when I say that, right? Like, do I want to be a writer or do I want to be a celebrity? And must it be, it needn't be either or. It could be both and. I really don't want to be a celebrity and just all of that. But we live in a culture of celebrity, it's so hard to escape it. And I really don't want to deal with it a lot of the time. I just want to do my work, just leave it the hell alone. And if you want to buy the book, lovely, but it's not, it's hard, it's hard.
I think a lot of writers are like that. Milan?
I just wanted to respond to that. So we tried this experiment with the releasing the videos just coming up to the book launch. We're just shooting a beautiful video show. So I've had 5 students come on a course recently because they saw the video. And I've had work come through Twitter because of the video. So the video...
It's a shop window.
Just weird things that I didn't think would happen. So so we just thought we would do that to just raise people's profile about the launch. And that's why we wanted to do that, and to raise people's profile from the book being out. But also, the guy who did it decided to put the book, when the video finished, put the book cover and say buy the book and go here. And so we've been seeing some sales from that as well. So it was just an experiment, but we're seeing some.
And if you crunch the numbers, and let's say we'll go with this really optimistic 400 sales figure for a book, for a poetry book, which is, as I say, really, really high. And say you get £1 every copy that you sell, it's 400 quid. Well, if you do a couple of days in conventions or universities or festivals, you might make that in 2 days instead. So I know that, as far as I'm concerned, actually, I would probably prefer to focus on doing a few days here, there, and everywhere, doing work for other things, than having to really, really plug a book really hard to kind of get the same amount of sales. So you can do both. It's usually better if you can.
Why you write them? If you're writing to sell.
If you're writing to sell, then it makes it difficult, I guess.
But if you're writing to, get your words out there to, be an activist or whatever it is, then it's slightly different, I don't think.
The one thing, sorry, just to go back to your point, I think that's a really good point you made about YouTube. I think that it's one of the things that I discovered, because I have done a lot of Carcanet sort of digital marketing, and one of the things I discovered is that when we put, say, videos of Mimi Calvati especially, people were using it as an educational thing, because what I didn't realise at the time, I sort of make the videos and put the book there, but when an author when an author is reading a poem at launch, they'll often give the background that you don't get from the book, and say and that's something that I found that a lot of people, when I looked into it, a lot of people were using it because they were studying that poem at school, that was very interesting, and I think that sort of you learn things. That's the thing about certainly from my experience, is that you learn as you're going along. You can take all the courses in the world, but you also you think, oh, I didn't realise that this is valuable for such and such a thing, and then what you also learn is that you make the material fit the medium, and you learn to think, okay, because to go back to, sorry, I'm going lots of different tangents, but to go back to the point about what can ebooks do for poetry, it's a very difficult problem. You really do have to make them fit the medium, and the problem with that is iPad is poetry doesn't necessarily work on all kinds of e-readers, as you said. What we can make it work on e-readers, but the e-readers that have the power to reproduce line endings are the kind of things that not very many people can afford, and not very many publishers can afford to make things for. So it's really a case of waiting for the industry, as you said, Alan, to catch up with us, or hoping that we win the lottery, I guess.
But then I think in terms of waiting for the industry, it's not going to be something that's going to be commercially driven when it comes to poetry. It won't be. So,
I don't think it's something that needs to be commercially driven. I think that in my experience of the digital world is that surprises come all the time. I think that certainly good things, especially good technological things, need a lot of money, but not always. And I think that really we're already experiencing things like we were having trouble with reproducing facing page translations. We've had some books which we just couldn't do because it was you'd say have the one language, the original language on one page, the English language version of the same poem on another, and that is not really something you can do on a Kindle. But now we're thinking, okay, what if we have this poem on one page and we hyperlink to the translation later on? Because if you produce the same thing, I think we have to stop doing expecting it to be the same. Just like ebooks can't be the same as print books anymore, than print books can be the same as the spoken word, and we should.
So I'm aware that we've only got, is it 50 minutes left?
15 minutes.
Yeah. So we're going to go on to marketing, but you had prepared a discussion piece to kind of kickstart it perhaps with marketing. Or do you think that we've already covered a lot of it?
We have already covered a lot of it, but well, actually no, only bits and pieces, and it contained 2 really good stories that I really like telling. So, can everyone hear me, by the way?
Yeah.
Okay. I'd like to start by telling you a couple of stories. Like all of my favourite stories, these 2 are embarrassing and at somebody else's expense. As you know, I work at Carcanet Press now, but about 7 or 8 years ago I went to a poetry reading at the Central Library in Manchester, given by one of our black authors who comes from Africa. I won't say the author's name or the country because it's possible that he might not like to have this story told. His book is one of my favourites that we publish, not that we are supposed to have favourites. And I love his writing style from the start. It's moving, it's funny, it's well judged in all the right ways. He writes about all kinds of things, but I particularly liked the way he writes about family. He's observant, poignant, but never sentimental. After the reading ended, the librarian told us that the poet, let's call him M, would be happy to answer any questions, and a voice came from the back of the room. A woman said, I have to say I'm quite disappointed. I was expecting to hear more about the wildlife, the animals, and the environment. Everyone in the room turned around to see the originator of these words, but apparently she was completely unashamed. In fact, she seemed genuinely annoyed, as though the poet, or Manchester Libraries themselves, had let her down, as though she hadn't got what she came for. And I think it's an unfortunate truth that black and Asian writers are often treated very differently from their white contemporaries. Many of you will know this. If you're a black or Asian writer, I would say you're about 1,000% more likely to be asked irrelevant questions about your blackness or Asianness when you're reading your work in public. So it's unlikely that this white, I would guess, middle-class woman, let's call her moron, would have raised her hand to ask a white author why he failed to represent his country. She wouldn't have asked him why he hadn't talked about how many libraries are being closed, or why working-class white boys are now even less likely to succeed in school than their black contemporaries. At the same time, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to get through all this, but at the same time, public conceptions of ethnicity are sometimes quite narrow. I think it's unlikely that any black poet I went to see would have been asked questions like, who are your favourite African drag queens? Or do you have a pride parade that's inclusive of LGBT and T people? Do you frequent gay bars, or do you prefer to use Grindr and save yourself the hassle? Things like that don't really get asked. The fact is, these would be quite random questions to ask at any reading, even by the gayest of authors. Even for the gayest of readers, the gayness of the author isn't necessarily the first thing that comes to mind. The problem is, with literature by the most well-known and well-loved black writers, it rarely comes to mind at all. Public conceptions of black and Asian people in this country have evolved. As a Nigerian growing up in Bolton in the 1990s, I remember being referred to as a Paki, and being asked more than once by other children to sing the song from the Totally Tropical Lilt advert, which was... Unfortunately, these public conceptions have evolved to an extent to exclude the LGBT community. I remember how pleased I was when reading one recent novel, Americana by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, and I found even a brief reference to the violence of homophobia in Nigeria. I was also disappointed when I was reading a memoir, which I think was, I'm not going to name it, I think it was undeservedly celebrated, made an even briefer reference, which was nowhere near as brave. It kind of touched on homophobia and kind of went on about other things. Trying to think of black gay writers or characters whose publishers have the resources and the influence to execute major marketing campaigns, I can think of maybe 3 or 4. Outside of the limelight of mass media, I think the numbers are endless, or almost endless. Another story. Okay, earlier this year, shortly after the death of Chinua Achebe, I managed to get a ticket to the launch of Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, there's the name again, her latest novel at the South Bank Centre. Words can't really describe my admiration for her novels, as I've already said. After the reading, there were lots of interesting questions about various things before somebody raised her hand and said, what are you doing to improve the literacy of young girls in Nigeria? The whole room turned round in shock, and the woman said, a little sheepishly, well, you're our new celebrity. The host of the reading, a self-described white middle-class man, scoffed and said it wasn't Adichie's responsibility to single-handedly turn Nigerian literacy around. Adichie herself said, and I love this, what am I doing? Nothing. What are you doing? Adichie then went on to explain that in fact she does give free classes in Nigeria and donates books to libraries, and that you don't have to be a successful writer to go down to a local library and help out. What she didn't say is that you shouldn't ask one person, I think I've already said this, or even many people to do what should be the work of a whole community. Adichie already contributes to the literacy of young girls in her own quiet, effective way. The audience member who raised her hand wasn't looking for works of charity, she was looking for celebrity. She wanted a new Chinua Achebe, as if that were possible. She wanted a figurehead. And how does this relate to marketing? Well, marketing tends to work through mediums that don't have a lot of time or space. Although we are fortunate in the poetry world to be generally appealing to people who like to read. If you think of the average book blurb or the average 15-second TV advert, when you're pushed for time, it's helpful if you can compare the book or the author to something that the reader is already familiar with, say a love story, or if you liked Game of Thrones, you might like this kind of thing. Or the father of modern African literature. This is a moniker with which Chinua Achebe was never quite completely comfortable. Manufactured figureheads like these are a time-saving measure for marketing executives, but when you try to make a figurehead out of a whole person, you have to do away with the body. You cut off the muscle, the tenacious grip, the legs to stand on, and dare I say it, even the loins. Writers can be brilliant social historians and activists, but forcing them to do this is, I think, quite a risky business. Asking one writer or painter or photographer to single-handedly represent their country, gender, sexual orientation, age group, or even time is a bad idea. What we usually get is, at best, a pretty narrow version of events, lacking in nuance that does not reflect the experience of the community. What I often say is that as a gay Nigerian, I'm not representative of Nigerians generally. I didn't grow up in Nigeria. English is my first language. It's not my only language, but it's my first. But I'm a nuance, but without a nuanced view, I think that view is quite narrow. At worst, what you get is propaganda. I think even in the 21st century, mainstream propaganda is unlikely to include the lived experiences of real gay people, black or white. In short, I don't think there is an awful lot of room at this particular inn. I don't think this is a bad thing, though. I think that good gay, black, or Asian writers that we do have all are to be celebrated and marketed for the same reason we celebrate and market all good writers, because they play their part in doing justice to the complexity and the richness of life. Anything more ambitious, a figurehead, is wooden and hollow. If these writers don't fit the version of blackness or Asianness that is pumped out to most members of the public, hypermasculine, sexually voracious and soulful, so much the better for it. There are probably, I'll miss that bit, but we don't need figureheads, role models or celebrities to make an effective marketing campaign, which possibly means that marketing is easier than I would like to admit. Do you want to just take something to catch your breath?
So I think, yeah, we did kind of touch on a lot of those issues actually already. I guess what was interesting in terms of marketing is, well, no, let's move beyond marketing and actually look at assumptions within our communities themselves, because you mentioned the sort of hyper-virile black man. I think that's something that you get sort of within the LGBT community, actually. I have a friend who is a drag queen and she's black, and people always expect her to be sort of hyper-virile and masculine, and she's really not, you know. So people do have that kind of problem, I guess, and I suppose in marketing that could be an issue too.
Before we look into, like, because we are a minority within a minority, when it comes to writing and stuff, do you not think we have to look at like the LGBT scene in general, and maybe like trying to address the racism issues in there, and trying to, I think maybe once we're accepted that we will be widely accepted LGBT writing.
Well, because I think it's not, I think there's more goes beyond racism as well. I think actually a lot of that, I keep referring to the LGBT community rather than gay, because actually gay just refers to men, and we don't often look at the experiences of women and bisexual people. Bisexual people are really ignored. Hello Asha, she's over there. And also the trans people, actually. So talking of the gay community, I find a bit limiting because it only refers to some of those people. But Dorothea, I think you wanted to say something.
No, I was just going to say that's not really a concern.
What is
it? You're saying, there's the racism in the LGBT community, and we need to get ourselves accepted by them.
I think once we have that acceptance, we can then go into being accepted within writing as well. And
But it might never happen, honey. And so, I suppose my comment comes from maybe I'm just cynical. Maybe I've just maybe I'm just been there, done that. I'm not holding, similarly to Cheryl was saying about, there's these certain, why am I pushing myself into a community that doesn't particularly want me there? I find the misogyny of the quote-unquote gay community quite difficult to deal with. It's not something that I want to put myself around.
I always have trouble when you hear of somebody says such and such a person was the first black person or the first woman, as though it's their achievement rather than the community that didn't accept black people or women for hundreds of years. And yes, you do have to be. You do have to, it does represent a certain achievement, but I think really it's more about the community that's only ever had one black president, or I think it's more about them than that just about the person that's being finally accepted.
Yeah, it's interesting. Sorry, just to add to that point, that's really interesting. But I think that you mentioned about figureheads as well, because of course things are shallow and hollow, and there's the whole market thing, but there's something about, I'm from a Somali background, if a Somali person does something, I'm not going to lie, I'm slightly happy, and I'm proud, and the whole community kind of stands up a bit tall, because it's like you're doing something that we've not been able to do for a long time.
It's that recognition,
they're
isn't
seeing, yeah, they're seeing, the hope, there's the light at the end of the tunnel, that there's progress being made in some way. So there's also the positive aspect of that figurehead in a way, and I never expect a good figurehead to accept that either. You mentioned.
No, that's interesting because you
just to expand on that.
I think the best figureheads are the people that don't want to be figureheads, actually, that just think, I'm going to be an iconoclast and do what the hell I want. But I think it is important to see that there are people like you, at least in some ways, that can achieve stuff, because if there had never been a black president, then you might think, well, it's never, ever going to happen, and then no one might ever go for it, because you might think, why bother to go and do that, because no one's ever going to be
I think you're drawing the distinction, which I don't think I clearly made, between achievement and marketing.
Yeah.
It's different to say, great that Barack Obama has done what he's done, but it's the way we talk about that, the way we market it, and the way we hold that within our community, that I think can be positive or negative.
Maya?
Yeah, so I would just like to go back to talking about marketing, because I am somebody whose work has been, I would say, mismarketed by people, and it's connected into what we just started talking about, which communities do you fit into and which kind of identity images do you fit into. So I've had, a play of mine was, which was a gay play, and it was mismarketed, and so people walked out of the play because it's kind of similar to that kind of thing, is that they had an expectation that they were coming to see, and we had this in the other discussion about an Asian play, so then there might be some things about curry in it or something, but it was like the gay play. And so I think the sort of, when we talk about market, we talk about marketing connected to products. We're applying these kind of marketing theories to a cultural product, which I think the marketing theories are flawed, and they're unable to kind of sell the work in that way, and so I think that then it's a problem. So if whether we're a writer or an author or a celebrity, and we want people to come and see our work, if the kind of theory of this kind of capitalist marketing is flawed, then it's not going to be able to get those people to come to our work.
Can I ask how it was marketed? What did they say, or what kind of things did they do?
Well, they put the title, and I'm trying not to name it because otherwise I will identify the place that it was on. And it's not really about that. It's just an example. So it was with my name and the name of the play. They just assumed that it was an Asian play, so then they would market it to the Asian community. Missed the whole gay thing out.
So you mean they didn't read the play before they marketed it?
No.
Right.
So that is one thing about understanding. Yeah. So these making, and you said the thing about not having much time to do the marketing, so they just read the title, read the author, and then take a shortcut to do that.
I would draw a distinction between not having time to do the marketing, which sounds like what was unfortunately what happened with your marketers, and not having time to read something that somebody's marketing to you. I think there's a difference between my not having time, and I do have time to make sure that I properly research the books I market, and my not having time to read 5 blurbs when I go into Waterstones. I might just only read the first line of one. Do you know what I mean?
Okay, yeah.
So, we're just going to wrap up now. I think What time are we on now? Oh, it's 1:45 now.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have to finish it there because I know we've all got loads to say. But Senit and Kai, I know if you want to chat to us afterwards, maybe then.
We all make our way to space 1, so your plenary session and...
Oh, and there's our reading tonight as well. So at 7 p.m. at Taurus, which is number 1 Canal Street, so it's literally 2-minute walk from the train station. There will be Thomas Glave, me, there will be Jerry Potter and Steph Pike. So it'll be quite an interesting, provocative reading, I imagine, and lots of fun. So if you want to come along, it's great. And you can ask questions there as well.